There's something strange about tarot. Not everyone believes in it, not everyone practices it, and yet almost everyone has some kind of reaction to it. Curiosity, fascination, skepticism, but for many people, fear. Not mild discomfort, but a deeper, almost instinctive resistance. They'll say things like, I don't want to mess with that, or that feels dangerous, or even, that's evil. And if you listen closely, what they're reacting to isn't actually the cards themselves. It's something far more psychological. Because tarot at its core doesn't do anything to you. It doesn't impose, control, or force outcomes. It reflects. And that reflection is precisely where the fear begins. Tarot functions like a mirror, but not the kind you hang on a wall. It's a symbolic mirror, a psychological one. It reflects patterns, emotions, contradictions, and unconscious dynamics that most people spend their lives avoiding. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Human beings are not naturally inclined towards self-confrontation. We like clarity, but only when it confirms what we already believe. We like insight, but only when it feels safe. We like truth, but only when it doesn't destabilize our identity. Tarot doesn't operate within those limits. It has a way of revealing what is hidden, not in a mystical, external sense, but internally. And when something internal becomes visible, it disrupts the illusion of control. That's where fear enters. Because most people are not afraid of tarot as a system. They're afraid of what it might show them. They're afraid of seeing patterns they've been repeating unconsciously. They're afraid of recognizing desires they've been suppressing. They're afraid of confronting contradictions in their own behavior. Tarot doesn't create these things. It exposes them. And psychologically, exposure is threatening. There's a concept in psychology known as cognitive dissonance, the discomfort we feel when two opposing beliefs or truths exist at the same time. For example, someone might believe they're in control of their life while simultaneously making choices that clearly show they're not. As long as that contradiction stays unconscious, it's manageable. But the moment it becomes visible, tension arises. Tarot accelerates that visibility. It brings unconscious material closer to the surface, often through symbolism rather than direct language. And symbols have a unique way of bypassing the logical mind. You don't argue with a symbol, you recognize it. That recognition can be subtle, or it can hit all at once. But either way, it creates a moment of psychological exposure, and for many people, that exposure feels like loss of control. Another layer of fear comes from projection. When people don't understand something, they tend to project meaning onto it. And historically, anything symbolic, intuitive, or nonlinear has been labeled as suspicious, irrational, or even dangerous. Tarot falls directly into that category. It doesn't function like a structured linear system. It doesn't provide rigid answers. It speaks in images, archetypes, and patterns. And for someone who relies heavily on logic as their primary way of navigating reality, that kind of system feels unpredictable. Unpredictability often gets translated into threat. So instead of engaging with tarot, the mind rejects it, not because it's harmful, but because it operates outside familiar structures. There's also a cultural layer to this fear. For centuries, symbolic systems like tarot have been associated with the unknown, the occult, or the forbidden. And even if someone doesn't consciously believe those narratives, they still exist in the background. They shape perception. So when someone encounters tarot, they're not just reacting to the cards in front of them, they're reacting to everything they've been taught, directly or indirectly, about what those cards represent. Fear, in that sense, is inherited. But beyond culture and cognition, there's something deeper. Tarot disrupts the idea that everything can be controlled externally. It shifts attention inward. And that shift is uncomfortable for a lot of people, because looking inward means taking responsibility, not in a moral sense, but in an awareness sense. It means recognizing that your patterns, your reactions, your decisions are not random, they're structured. And once you see the structure, you can't unsee it. That's why some people avoid tarot entirely. Not because they think it will harm them, but because they sense on some level that it will change the way they see themselves. And change, even positive change, can feel threatening. There's also the question of identity. Most people have a mental image of who they are, a stable narrative. I'm this kind of person. I don't do that. I would never be like that. Tarot doesn't respect those fixed narratives. It introduces complexity. It shows that within one person, there can be multiple, even contradictory archetypes. You can be both the one in control and the one avoiding reality. You can be both confident and insecure. You can be both aware and in denial. That kind of psychological multiplicity destabilizes identity. And when identity feels unstable, fear appears. Because identity is how we orient ourselves in the world. Without it, things feel uncertain. But here's where it becomes interesting. The fear of tarot is not a sign that something is wrong with tarot. It's a sign that tarot is touching something real. Fear is not always a warning. Sometimes it's an indicator of proximity. It shows you where something meaningful is located. And in the case of tarot, what it points to is the unconscious. In Jungian psychology, the unconscious is not just a passive storage space. It's active, structured, symbolic. It communicates through images, dreams, and archetypes. Tarot operates within that same language. That's why it feels intuitive to some people and unsettling to others, because it doesn't speak to the surface mind, it speaks to deeper layers, and deeper layers are harder to control. So what people often interpret as fear of tarot is actually discomfort with their own unconscious material. The cards simply act as a trigger. They create a moment where something internal becomes visible, even if only partially, and visibility changes things. Once something is seen, it enters awareness. Once it enters awareness, it can no longer operate in the same hidden way. That's a shift in power, and shifts in power, especially internal ones, can feel destabilizing. But they're also where transformation begins. Because when you remove the fear narrative around tarot, what you're left with is a tool, a symbolic system that helps you observe patterns, not predict fate, a mirror that reflects, not dictates. And the real question becomes, are you afraid of the cards? Or are you afraid of what becomes visible when you look into them? Because if it's the second one, then the fear is not something to avoid. It's something to understand. And once you understand it, it loses its intensity. Not because the process becomes easy, but because it becomes clear. And clarity changes your relationship to fear. It turns it from something that controls you into something that informs you. So instead of asking whether tarot is dangerous, a more accurate question would be, what part of me feels threatened by reflection? What part of me resists being seen, even by myself? That's where the real work is. And that's also where the real power of tarot lies. Not in predicting outcomes, not in telling you what will happen, but in showing you what is already there, waiting to be recognized. And once you recognize it, you have a choice to ignore it or to work with it. Most people choose to ignore it. That's why fear persists. But those who choose to look realize that the fear was never about tarot. It was about stepping into a deeper level of awareness. And awareness, while unsettling at first, is ultimately stabilizing because it replaces illusion with understanding. And understanding, with time, creates a different kind of confidence. Not the kind that comes from certainty, but the kind that comes from seeing clearly. And tarot, when approached this way, is not something to fear. It's something that asks you to be honest. And honesty, more than anything else, is what most people are not prepared for. Not because they're incapable of it, but because they've never been shown how to face it without judgment. That's the gap, and that's exactly where tarot enters. Not as something supernatural, but as something psychological, a system that reveals what is already present and invites you to engage with it consciously. So the fear of tarot doesn't need to be eliminated. It needs to be understood. Because once you understand it, you realize that the cards were never the source of fear. They were simply the surface. The real depth was always within you.